Franklin Delano Roosevelt, also known as FDR for short, was born in 1882 in Hyde Park, New York, to the prominent Roosevelt family. His family was very affluent and wealthy, as merchants and landowners. Roosevelt was homeschooled until the age of 14. Afterwards, he began attending a boarding school in Massachusetts, Groton. Like many of his classmates at Groton, FDR went to Harvard. At Harvard, he became the editor-in-chief of the Harvard Crimson Daily newspaper. Roosevelt's support of Wilson would earn him the appointment to Assistant Secretary of the Navy, where he served from 1913 to 1919. During World War I, Roosevelt coordinated the deployment of naval vessels and personnel. Roosevelt then decided to seek the 1920 vice president nomination, which he lost, but this gained him many valuable relationships that would help him in the 1932 election. His career, however, became held back by his illness, which was diagnosed as polio. This caused him to become paralyzed from the waist down. He then taught himself how to walk with a cane and was careful not to be seen in a wheelchair. Franklin then ran for governor of New York, where he served for 2 terms. Then he ran for the office of president in 1932. His progressive policies as New York governor helped secure him the Democratic Party nomination. He won by a landslide and became the 32nd president of the United States. He served from 1932 to 1945, when he had died. After his victory, Roosevelt needed to step up to bring the U.S. out of the economic depression. By March, there were over 13 million unemployed Americans, and nearly every single bank was closed. In his first 100 days, he proposed and Congress enacted a sweeping program to bring recovery to agriculture and business. The program provided relief to the unemployed and those in danger of losing farms and homes. By 1935, the nation achieved some form of recovery, but many businessmen and bankers began turning on FDR's New Deal. They were outraged that he took the nation off of the gold standard, allowed the deficits in the budget, and disliked his stance on labor unions. Roosevelt had then created a new program of reform, Social Security, as well as heavier taxes on the wealthy, new controls over banks and public utilities, and a gigantic work relief program for the unemployed. He was then re-elected in 1936 by a huge margin. Roosevelt had pledged the U.S. to the Good Neighbor policy, altering the Monroe Doctrine to include mutual action against aggressors. He expanded foreign policy by trying to keep America neutral in Europe, yet at the same time he wanted to protect nations that were threatened or attacked. When France lost and Britain was under attack, Roosevelt sent all aid except for actual military involvement. Then, when the Japanese attacked at Pearl Harbor, Roosevelt declared war and directed all manpower and resources for war. After the war, he spent a great deal of time creating the United Nations in an attempt to ensure peace.
An estimated 1 in 4 Americans were jobless. Lines in bread banks were frequently hours long, full of people looking for their only meal of the day. America, both socially and economically, was broken. Under the leadership of Franklin D. Roosevelt, a multi-step plan known as the New Deal was enacted. Over the course of a decade, the New Deal gradually helped improve job opportunities, economic output, and social conditions that had been previously swamped by the economic crisis. The passage of additional emergency aid and agricultural relief programs provided additional cushioning to aid the American people while a solution could be ironed out. In the coming years after his inauguration, Roosevelt introduced additional acts that aimed to address the core issues that had led to the Depression in the first place. That way, the economic downturn could be slowed and safeguards to prevent future disasters could be implemented. Under the multi-step recovery that was the New Deal, Roosevelt implemented several economic and social reforms with each step, with many standing strong to present times. In the first stage of the New Deal, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, Federal Emergency Relief Act, the National Recovery Act, and other similar policies were enacted in the first 100 days of Roosevelt's presidency. These programs were introduced to handle the initial worst aspects of the Depression, such as poor agricultural programs and economic faults. One of the most crucial aspects of the New Deal was the introduction of the Social Security Act, which kickstarted the Social Security program that assists millions of Americans each year since its inception. The creation of the National Labor Relations Act of 1935 allowed for the development of a proper labor movement in the United States through the allotment of a collective bargaining. As a result, workers gained more protected rights and wages. In modern times, historians have argued about the exact impact the New Deal had on American society and its economy. The general consensus is that the New Deal alone was not enough to drag America out of the Depression, but was a combination of it and the production that was crucial during the Second World War.
President Roosevelt's New Deal aimed at promoting economic recovery and putting Americans back to work through federal activism, where many new federal agencies were created. These agencies and programs attempted to control agricultural production, stabilize wages and prices, and create a vast public works program for the unemployed. Their goals summarized under 3 R's: relief, recovery, and reform. Employees from Works Progress Administration and Civilian Conservation Corps put in labor in national forests, national parks, and on Indian reservations for natural resource related projects. There was the first New Deal, which lasted from 1933 to 1934, and the second New Deal, which lasted from 1935 to 1936. The first New Deal dealt with the pressing bank crisis through the Emergency Banking Act and the 1933 Banking Act. The Federal Emergency Relief Administration provided $500 million for relief operations by states and cities. The Securities Act of 1933 was enacted to prevent a repeated stock market crash. The National Recovery Administration was also established in 1933 and was aimed to eliminate bad competition and to bring industry, labor, and government together to create a code of fair practices and prices. The second New Deal included the National Labor Relations Act to protect labor organizing, Work Progress Administration Relief Program, making the government the largest employer in the world, the Social Security Act, and other programs designed to aid farmers and migrant workers. Other major elements of the New Deal were the creation of the United States Housing Authority and the Farmers Security Administration, both being created in 1937, and the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, setting maximum hours and minimum wages for workers. Mark Keppel High School began production on December 19, 1938. Mark Keppel is one of the thousands of projects built by the Public Works Administration. The Public Works Administration was a large-scale construction agency of the United States that was created as a part of the New Deal. The Public Works Administration had built 7,488 schools across the U.S., and Mark Keppel being one of them. The building of our school helped to keep construction workers employed for 2 whole years.